I don't need anyone to commit to taking care of me. But don't say you will.
And the Grammy goes to...
And the Grammy goes to...
Flowers.
I don't pay attention to the negative. How many times have we seen this play out in pop music? You know now. You know what's happened. Madonna's done it. Britney's done it. Every VMA performance, anyone that performs, that's what you're looking for. You're wanting to make history. Me and Robin the whole time said, you know we're about to make history right now.
She once wore a blonde wig and played America's sweetheart. Now she's bearing her soul, and sometimes her body on global stages, daring the world to judge her. But as Miley Cyrus steps into a new era of creative chaos, the world can't help but ask, why does it feel like she's trying so hard? Why does it seem like she's constantly pushing, constantly rebelling, constantly reaching for something just out of view? This isn't just a rebrand, it's a reckoning. And behind the glitter, the grit, and the screams of empowerment is a question nobody wants to say out loud, but we will. Miley Cyrus has always been loud. Loud in her music, loud in her statements, loud in her choices. From the Disney Channel to wrecking balls, from country twang to pop stardom, she's never been afraid of change. But lately, something feels different. Her boldness has become unrelenting. Her visuals are more extreme. Her interviews, more emotional. She's not just performing anymore. She's confronting the public with a version of herself that seems desperate to be seen, or maybe desperate not to be misunderstood. What's behind this urgency? It didn't start with bangers. It didn't even start with that infamous VMA performance. It began long before that, when a teenage girl named Destiny Hope Cyrus was asked to smile on command. She was 13 when she became Hannah Montana, the perfect pop puppet for millions of fans. But what the world didn't see were the panic attacks, the voice strain, the blurred lines between her real self and the girl in the wig. For Miley, the camera never turned off. Even her most private moments, her first kiss, her first heartbreak, were broadcast and devoured. So when she finally snapped the strings of that doll-like image, the world called it rebellion. But what if it was just survival? Years passed. She chopped her hair, shed her clothes, and shed even more expectations. But the louder she got, the more the world questioned her sanity. In 2013, she told Rolling Stone she wasn't just breaking rules, she was burning them. She called it freedom. The media called it a meltdown, but who was really in control? The truth is, Miley wasn't falling apart. She was reconstructing herself, piece by painful piece. But as each era passed, the desperation to define herself grew stronger. Country, population rock, psychedelic, ballads, punk disco. Her sound shifted like sand. Was this evolution or an identity crisis? Every time Miley tried to show her real self, the spotlight grew hotter. Fans demanded the old her. Critics demanded she grow up. But how can you grow when the world keeps demanding you regress? That pressure cracked something. In 2020, Miley released Plastic Hearts, a rock-infused, smoky-throated rebirth. It was raw, it was powerful, but it didn't chart like her past work. Despite critical praise, the numbers didn't match her risk. Interviews revealed a deeper pain. Miley admitted to struggling with voice injuries, fear of being forgotten, and an aching need for authenticity. She said, "People don't take me seriously. I can sing with my whole chest, and they still hear a joke." So she pushed harder. In 2023, she dropped Flowers, a self-love anthem that topped charts and reintroduced her to a new generation. The world loved it. But instead of resting, Miley dove deeper into performance art. In 2025, she shocked critics with Something Beautiful, a visual album drenched in symbolism, chaos, and vulnerability. She wore bandages. She danced in blood-red light. She quoted Leonard Cohen. She sang like she was exorcising something from her chest. But what was she trying to purge? And why does it feel like she's daring us to look away, just so she can scream louder? Fame isn't just a spotlight, it's a mirror, one that reflects what the world wants from you, and sometimes what you never wanted to see in yourself. For Miley Cyrus, the mirror became a weapon. As she stepped further from her Hannah Montana persona, her every move became a public autopsy. Her 2013 VMA performance wasn't just a dance routine, it was a declaration of war on her old image. The foam finger, the nude latex two-piece, the tongue. America gasped. But they weren't just shocked by the performance. They were angry that the girl they grew up with had grown into a woman. And Miley? She was furious that they thought she owed them innocence. That anger fueled Bangers, her most controversial and liberating album at the time. But behind the neon lights and hip-hop beats was a deep ache. The death of her relationship with Liam Hemsworth. As the media focused on her wild behavior, they missed the reality. Miley was grieving. She wasn't just loud, she was hurting. But pain, for Miley, didn't look like tears. It looked like glitter, rebellion, and reinvention. And in that pain, a pattern began to form. Every era wasn't just an artistic choice. It was a cry for a new self. When she leaned into psychedelia with Miley Cyrus and her dead pets, critics rolled their eyes. When she returned to country roots on Younger Now, people accused her of running back to safety. When she belted out rock anthems in Plastic Hearts, the applause came, but not with the same thunder her old hits had. The industry labeled her inconsistent. The public called her confusing. And deep down, Miley began to wonder if she'd ever be enough. What the audience saw as chaos, Miley saw as survival. Every album was a purge. Every stage performance is a resurrection. She was not a pop star playing roles. She was trying to excavate her truest form, layer by layer. But the more she changed, the less people seemed to recognize her. And that's when a darker fear began to settle in. What if the real Miley doesn't sell? In interviews, she's confessed to an unsettling duality: the pressure to perform versus the craving to disappear, the need to make art versus the fear of being misunderstood. She told Rolling Stone she never wants to tour again, not because she doesn't love her fans, but because she no longer wants to be a product on a platform, forced to smile when she's struggling. Imagine waking up every day knowing the world will only love you if you wear the right version of yourself. Then came Flowers, a simple, empowering anthem with an explosive impact. It went viral. It topped the charts. It introduced Miley to Gen Z in a way she hadn't experienced since her Disney days. But something about its success felt different. It wasn't the edgy Miley that people expected. It was melodic, controlled, soft in power. And the moment it soared, everyone celebrated it as her mature return, as if finally she'd stopped being desperate. But here's the twist. Miley wasn't calming down. She was shifting her strategy. Just 2 years later, she dropped Endless Summer Vacation, and then in 2025 came her most avant-garde project yet. Something Beautiful, a visual album drenched in symbolism, trauma, and performance art. It was raw, disorienting, and deeply revealing. She danced barefoot in broken rooms. She cried through smoky monologues. She bled in metaphors. Every frame whispered the same thing. I'm still here. Are you finally listening? And yet, the response was muted. Critics called it too abstract. Audiences scrolled past. And that's when the desperation reared its head again. Not from Miley's actions, but from the silence that followed. She had bared everything. And still, some people wanted the girl in the wig. There's a hidden cost in being someone who reinvents too much. People stop trusting your identity. They treat every version of you as temporary. And in Miley's case, the more she shifts, the more the world waits, not to embrace her, but to ask, who will she become next? And will we like that version? But this isn't a marketing game to her anymore. It's psychological. Miley has said on record that she doesn't believe in the traditional timeline of fame. She doesn't want a neat legacy. She wants to live and die as many creative lives as she can. But that kind of artistic hunger, it looks desperate to people who are used to predictability. Miley Cyrus isn't desperate for attention. She's desperate to matter on her own terms. If Miley's not the one who's desperate, here's the twist. We've spent over a decade asking the wrong question. Why is Miley so desperate? But why are we so desperate to control her? Every time Miley sheds a layer, we rush to label it rebellious, desperate, unstable, trying too hard. But what if Miley isn't reinventing herself to get our approval? What if she's reinventing herself because she's already seen what our approval costs, and she doesn't want it anymore? Let's go back. Miley's arc mirrors a pattern we've seen over and over again in pop culture. Young women are celebrated when they're pure, quiet, and controlled. But the second they grow into something more complex, more sexual, more assertive, more unpredictable, the world turns. Think Britney, think Amy, think Lindsay. Women who dared to evolve faster than the industry could box them in. And Miley, she was next in line. But unlike some of her predecessors, Miley refused to play along. She didn't wait for permission to change. She didn't ease the world into her new self. She burned her old self down unapologetically, and we couldn't handle it because Miley's evolution forced a mirror on us. Her boldness asked us uncomfortable questions. Why does female sexuality make people so angry? Why does confidence read as arrogance when it comes from a woman? Why do we expect celebrities to suffer for our entertainment? The real desperation, it turns out, might not be hers at all. In 2022, Miley gave an interview where she said, "People want the version of you that makes them feel comfortable, the version that doesn't make them question themselves." That quote reveals everything. Miley isn't desperate for headlines, she's desperate to exist beyond them. And when the headlines get quiet, when her boldness isn't viral anymore, when her experiments don't chart, she doesn't vanish. She creates louder, stranger, bolder, not to beg for attention, but to remind herself and us that she doesn't need permission to be chaotic. In a world that told her who to be since childhood, Miley Cyrus is screaming just to hear her own voice clearly. But the more we ignore that, the more we call it desperate. There comes a moment in every artist's life when they stop performing for applause and start performing for survival. For Miley Cyrus, that moment didn't come with Wrecking Ball or flowers or even something beautiful. It came the day she realized no version of her would ever be enough for everyone. Not the pop princess, not the rebel, not the rocker, not the woman in a suit dancing in grief under strobe lights. So she stopped trying to be everything to everyone and started being everything to herself. And that's what we were never ready for. In 2024, when Miley released a short film to accompany her spoken word project, What Was Never Mine, she included a line that shattered her audience. "They never wanted me whole, just the pieces they could carry." That line wasn't just poetry, it was a confession. For years, she's given us versions of herself so raw, so unpolished, so daring that we didn't know how to hold them. We wanted Hannah Montana, or at least someone close to it, someone easier, someone digestible. But Miley doesn't exist for comfort. She exists for disruption. She builds a legacy that isn't neat, but it's honest. Not polished, but permanent. Not always pretty, but undeniably real. And maybe that's all she ever wanted. Not applause, not perfection, not redemption, just to finally be seen. Not as a character, not as a scandal, but as a woman who survived the spotlight and chose not to run.